There is something science discovered about the human brain that nobody talks about. Something that explains why some men collapse under pressure while others become stronger because of it. It is not willpower. It is not genetics. It is not even mindset, at least not the way motivational speakers define it. By the end of this video you will learn what has been hidden in plain sight for decades. What the greatest minds in neuroscience, history, and philosophy converged on, independently, without knowing each other existed. And believe me, it will change how you see every obstacle in front of you. In 1914, Thomas Edison watched his entire laboratory burn to the ground. Decades of work. Thousands of experiments. Irreplaceable prototypes and notebooks, gone in hours. Edison was 67 years old. His son Charles stood next to him watching the flames consume everything and expected to see his father break. Expected tears. Expected collapse. Instead Edison turned to him and said, "Go get your mother and all her friends. They will never see a fire like this again." The next morning Edison walked into the ruins and said, "There is great value in disaster. All our mistakes are burned up. Thank God we can start anew." 3 weeks later his laboratory was back in operation. Most people hear that story and think Edison was extraordinary. A superhuman. A man built differently from the rest. But here is what they miss. Edison did not have a special gene for resilience. He was not born without fear. He felt the loss completely, every notebook, every experiment, every year of his life that had gone into that building. The difference was not what he felt. The difference was what he believed the feeling meant. And that single distinction, what you believe your pain means, is the entire foundation of why some men never quit. But to understand why that works, we have to go somewhere most people have never been. Inside the brain of a man who is about to give up. In the 1960s, a psychologist named Martin Seligman conducted an experiment that would become one of the most important discoveries in the history of human psychology. He placed dogs in a situation where they received mild electric shocks they could not escape. After a period of time he changed the situation, he opened a door. An easy exit. A simple solution. The dogs did not move. They lay down and accepted the shocks. Even though the door was open. Even though escape was possible. Even though the pain could have ended immediately. Seligman called this learned helplessness. And here is the part that should disturb you. He ran the same experiment on humans. Not with electric shocks, with unsolvable problems, with repeated failure, with situations designed to make people feel powerless. The result was identical. After enough repeated failure, the human brain physically rewires itself to stop trying. Not metaphorically. Physically. The neural pathways that generate the impulse to act, to try, to push forward, begin to atrophy. They weaken from disuse the same way a muscle weakens when you stop training it. The man who quits does not quit because he is weak. He quits because his brain has been trained, through repeated experience, to believe that trying is pointless. This is the most important thing to understand about the men who never quit. They did not escape this process. Every man who never quits has felt learned helplessness at some point, has felt the floor disappear beneath him. Has felt the door close with no exit visible. The difference is what they did in that exact moment. And what they did is so counterintuitive that most people, even when they hear it, refuse to believe it works. In 1940 Winston Churchill stood before the British Parliament. France had fallen. The British Army had barely escaped Dunkirk. Hitler controlled most of Europe. America had not yet entered the war. Every rational analysis of the situation pointed to one conclusion. Negotiate. Surrender. Accept terms. Churchill's own cabinet was split. Senior ministers were pushing for peace talks. The pressure was enormous, political, military, moral. Churchill stood up and said, "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall never surrender." Not because he believed Britain would win. He did not know that. Nobody knew that. He said it because he understood something about human psychology that the rational analysts missed entirely. The moment you open the door to quitting, even slightly, the brain begins to prefer it. Psychologists call this the path of least resistance principle. Once the nervous system identifies an exit, any exit, it begins to route energy toward that exit automatically. Below conscious awareness. Below willpower. Below intention. The man who never quits does not fight this principle. He eliminates the exit entirely. He burns the option of quitting before the moment of pressure arrives, because he knows that in the moment of pressure his brain will look for it. And if it finds it, it will take it. Hernan Cortés landed in Mexico in 1519 with 600 men facing an empire of millions. He burned his ships. Not as a dramatic gesture. As a psychological strategy. He understood, 5 centuries before neuroscience confirmed it, that the brain fights hardest when retreat is impossible. But here is what nobody tells you about the men who burn their ships. There is something they carry inside them that makes the burning possible. Something that has nothing to do with courage and everything to do with a specific way of seeing time. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist who survived for Nazi concentration camps including Auschwitz. He lost his wife, his parents, his brother. His life's work, a manuscript he had hidden in his coat lining, was destroyed on the first day. In conditions designed to break the human spirit completely, he made an observation that would become the foundation of an entire school of psychology. The men who survived, not physically, but psychologically, were not the strongest. They were not the most aggressive. Not the most physically capable. They were the men who had a reason that extended beyond the present moment. Frankl wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." This is not philosophy. This is neuroscience. When the brain has a future it believes in, a specific, vivid, meaningful future, it processes present pain differently. The pain does not disappear. But it changes category. It moves from pointless suffering to the price of something that matters. And the human brain, when it believes suffering has a point, can endure almost anything. This is the hidden mechanism behind every man who never quit. Edison had a vision of a world lit by electricity. The pain of one burning laboratory was a small price. Churchill had a vision of a free Europe. The weight of an impossible war was a burden worth carrying. Frankl had a vision of telling the world what he had witnessed. The horror of the camps became material for the book that would help millions. The man who never quits is not running from something. He is running toward something so specific, so vivid, so non-negotiable that quitting would feel like a betrayal of the only thing that matters. And this brings us to the thing nobody says out loud about resilience. The thing that has been hiding in every story of every man who refused to break. The final truth. The one that changes everything. The man who never quits is not special. He is not built differently. He does not feel less pain. He does not have a supernatural tolerance for suffering. He simply made a decision, once, quietly, often in complete darkness, that his vision was non-negotiable. And then he let that decision make every other decision for him. When Edison's laboratory burned, the decision had already been made years before. When Churchill stood before Parliament, the decision had been made in the privacy of his own mind long before the cameras arrived. When Frankl walked through the gates of Auschwitz, the decision was already inside him before anyone tried to take it. The question is never whether you can endure. The question is whether you have decided what you are enduring for. Because once that decision is made, truly made, not performed, not announced, but felt in the deepest part of who you are, quitting becomes not just difficult. It becomes impossible. Every man who ever built something real passed through the moment where quitting felt like the only rational choice. The difference was never strength, it was the decision made before the darkness arrived. If this reached something in you, leave a like. It takes 1 second and it means everything. Subscribe if you are not here yet. The next video goes further.